Welcome back. In this one, we're ranking some of the most iconic and fun and memorable and heartwarming and strange and nostalgic places in the Zelda-verse. Of course, I'm talking about towns, those bastions of civilization that dot the unforgiving landscape of Hyrule. Outside their walls, it's dangerous to go alone, but within dwell some of the most intriguing and unforgettable characters in Zelda canon. Over the course of the series, their purpose has evolved from mere pit stops to fully fledged societies, filled with stories, side quests, and secrets. Honestly, some of my favorite moments from Zelda games, both gameplay and story, happen in towns. So in this video, I'm ranking every single town in the series, in one giant countdown. But first, 3 quick thoughts. Number 1. What counts as a town? Well, that question is surprisingly tricky, but I tried to follow a few basic rules. First, it's main series only, so places like Port Town and the jazzy version of Kakariko Village found in Cadence of Hyrule won't make the list. Second, I generally only considered places that are home to multiple unrelated residents. My most important rule was that the town be considered a town by the game in which it appears, so other vestiges of civilization, like stables, ranches, submarines, wandering nomads, and old men hiding in caves, don't qualify either. When in doubt, I used my best judgment, but showed a preference for places that have a shop, an important NPC, or that have town, village, or city in their name. Ultimately, I put together a list of 75 towns, which I think is pretty comprehensive. Number 2. In order to spice up this list, I've added some bonus details and rankings along the way. So if you see the Hyrule Historia icon flash across the screen, that means that the town in question is of historical significance to the Zelda universe. You can think of it as Hyrule's version of World Heritage Sites. When that icon appears, I'll explain exactly how that town is a part of Zelda history. I've also narrowed down my top 10 town soundtracks and my top 10 unique shops. When Marin sings her way across the screen, that means the town in question earned a top 10 soundtrack spot. And if Mallow pokes his creepy head up, it's a top 10 shopping scene. These top 10s are in no particular order, but hopefully it's a fun side contest, so watch out for these icons during the countdown. Number 3. This whole list is totally subjective, even, dare I say, arbitrary. What clicks for me might be your most hated destination, or vice versa. That's completely cool. Leave your most scathing review of Kakariko Village, or make a case for why Mido Town is the greatest locale in the series. Tell me why your personal favorite deserves a higher place, or how I'm too easily charmed by the cute little shoe houses in Minish Village. Ranking stuff is just a fun way to pass the time, so I hope you enjoy following along. Anyway, without further ado, let's go to town. Number 75. Coming in dead last is Old Kasuto Town, Zelda 2. This is the worst town from the game with the worst towns, and it commits the cardinal sin of Zelda towns. It has no residents. Arguably, I should not have included it on this list for that reason, but it's called Kasuto Town, and it has the same overworld sprite as all the other towns in the game, and actually there is one resident. Kasuto Town was destroyed by Ganon's forces, meaning the whole town looks like London after the Blitz. Most of the buildings cannot be entered, and the whole time you're there, invisible enemies swoop down and hurt you, even while you're reading signs, which is just unfair. The town's sole survivor is obnoxious in his own right, because he teaches you the spell needed to defeat the final boss, but only if Link obtains all 8 magic containers. Neither of these conditions is made clear in-game, so if you played this game without a guide, first of all you're insane, but second, this was probably your last annoying stop on the road to the Great Palace. Old Kasuto Town just isn't good, but luckily it's all uphill from here. Number 74. City in the Sky, Twilight Princess. But wait, I hear you saying, this place isn't a town, it's a dungeon. Well, it's both, and this is the first of several towns where we have to make a distinction between the town and the location. As a dungeon, City in the Sky is alright, but as a city, it sucks. Perhaps worse than having no residents at all is having residents I hate. These humanoid sky chickens are frankly upsetting to look at. I can tell you I have never once used Uku and her creepy son's dungeon ability, and the last thing I wanted was to see an entire city filled with them, especially after they sent me on a tedious filler quest to repair the Dominion Rod just when things were getting good. Apart from Uku and the shopkeeper, who inexplicably sells wares his people could never use, none of the Uka speak English, and their culture seems to consist of milling about and waiting to be picked up and used as gliders. It's a no from me, dog. Number 73, it's Naburu Town, Zelda 2. The most damning thing I can say about the towns in Zelda 2 is that I had to look up which one was which. This one has, no distinguishing features, and even a mega fan would struggle to pick it out of a lineup, despite it being named for one of the more interesting stages in Ocarina of Time. The main elements, as you will soon see, are ripped from the same sprite sheet as every other town in the game, making this place more of a pit stop than a unique destination. It makes an alright base if you want to grind some XP out of the local tech-type population, but apart from that, you won't be spending much time here. Number 72. Village of Outcasts, A Link to the Past. Flash that history icon across the screen because this town makes Zelda history as the first town in the series to contain a dungeon. This will go on to be a prominent trope, but Thieves Town is the first dungeon to be situated in a village. The Dark World version of Kakariko Village actually has a pretty cool aesthetic, but the fact that it shares a soundtrack and a color palette with the rest of the Dark World makes it feel more like an extension of the overworld than a town proper. There is a small shop and a treasure chest minigame, but the only other residents are enemies who attack you and steal your stuff. Who exactly the outcasts are and where they are outcast from is not explained. Although the skeletal chickens are cool, there's nothing really to do or see here. Number 71. Roro Town, Zelda 2. This town isn't just a historical town, it's the historical town. Canonically, Roro is the first town in the entire series, although it is possible to visit Rudo Town beforehand. As such, it laid down the basic formula not only for this game but for future games. The towns in Zelda 2 are basically places to recharge and refocus in between dungeons. They feature healing facilities, side quests that reward Link with new abilities, and villagers who provide hints about where to go next. That said, you're going to see a lot of towns from Zelda 2 in the first third of this list, and there's a few reasons why. I'm not trying to dump on the adventure of Link, but it was the earliest attempt to incorporate society into the Zelda experience, and it feels quite primitive in hindsight. For one thing, NPC dialogue in this game leaves a lot to be desired. I don't know if it's a memory issue or a translation issue or both, but the dialogue in this game is incredibly sparse and cryptic. Later games use dialogue to not only share hints, but to tell stories, build out the world, and add humor. For another, the side quests are all basic fetch quests. Go here, get this, learn a new technique. At some point, the chore of following a local woman's badly translated hint in order to access another basement-dwelling wizard becomes more formulaic than fun. But maybe the thing that hurts most is how much these towns lack personality. The citizens are copy-pasted from town to town. The buildings look like they were all lifted from a single sprite sheet, and the same music appears in practically every town, making them all a bit samey. Roro Town isn't bad, it just isn't that special. Number 70. Gerudo Village, Four Swords Adventures. The problem with towns in Four Swords Adventures is that the game is level-based, like a Mario game, so all the towns are one-shot detours. This place is pretty unremarkable, as it's basically a staging point for a larger, unrelated desert level. Most players won't spend more than a minute or two checking out this little outpost, and they'll never see it a second time unless they replay the stage for some reason. Still, it's nice to see the Gerudo featured, and there's some interesting flavor text about Ganondorf's desert life. It's also the only time the Gerudo have shown up in a 2D Zelda game, which is a neat bit of trivia. Put it on the list of towns that are nice to pass through but won't stick in anyone's memory. Number 69. Zuna Village, Four Swords Adventures. It's a bit odd that a game with only 4 towns stuck 2 of them in the same level, but that is what happened. This place is located just a little further into the desert than Gerudo Village, but I like it slightly more because it's goofy and unique. The Zuna tribe has never appeared before or since, but I like their little cactus houses, the fact that they look like cucumbers with turbans, and this guy who says Ganondorf gave off bad vibes. There's a Zuna offering something called a sand rub for 100 force gems, but I can't say it was worth the investment. It's one of the most peripheral blink and you miss it towns in the whole series, but it's a fun detour. Number 68. Mido Town, Zelda 2. Also known as the harbor town of Mido, Mido Town is your last stop shop before jetting off to eastern Hyrule. The central landmark is a 2-story church, the white cross steeple of which was hacked off by the localization team, only to be replaced with a suspiciously similar black crucifix. The more curious architectural feature of the church, however, is that the second-story entrance is situated just 1 floor above the basement. Mido Town is one of only 2 towns in the game where Link can gain a new sword skill, and the downward thrust is hands down the most useful technique in the game. Also on offer in Mido Town is the powerful Fairy Spell, which allows Link to transform into a tiny sprite, permitting him to fly over gaps and ledges and dart through keyholes. The Fairy Spell and the downward thrust are both more memorable than Mido Town itself, but these power-ups are a nice boost before heading to port and embarking on the second half of the game. Number 67. Rudo Town, Zelda 2. This is the other town you can visit first in the Adventure of Link, and lukewarm take alert, the better of the two. Rudo Town featured a fetch quest before we knew what fetch quests were, and it involved fetching the town's stolen idol. Of course, back in the Reagan years, Nintendo of America wouldn't dare expose our tender Western souls to such blatant paganism, so the localization team changed the translation from Town Idol to Town Trophy, which I think is pretty funny. Ruto Town is also home to the most mimetic figure in possibly all of Zelda canon, Error. The internet will never forget that time he introduced himself, and neither will I. Number 66. Cloud Tops, the Minish Cap. About 3/4 of the way through the Minish Cap, you discover that the Wind Tribe has abandoned their earthly home and relocated their entire civilization high above the clouds. Curiosity piqued, you head off in hot pursuit. Will this mysterious city be entirely crafted from the clouds? Perhaps a mechanical wonder of propellers and hot air balloons? No, it will be a 4-story apartment complex in the sky. Cool. The Wind Tribe residence falls into the category of gatekeeping towns, places you pass through en route to dungeons or other story destinations. As you make your way to the roof, you can chat with various residents before gaining permission to enter the Palace of Winds and leaving the Cloud Tops behind forever. The most interesting thing about this place is the miniature saga of Gregol and the Ghost. Earlier in the game, you can visit the sickbed of a man called Gregol, who is being tormented by an unfriendly spirit. It's possible to perform a Gust Jar exorcism, and if you do, a recovered Gregol will greet Link warmly on his return and offer the powerful light arrows as a reward. If you didn't visit earlier, you'll instead be informed of Gregol's untimely death and miss out on the light arrows forever. C'est la vie. Number 65, Saria Town, Zelda 2. While it is difficult to tell Zelda 2 towns apart, Saria Town has the distinguishing feature of being divided into 2 separate towns on the overworld map. The 2 halves are joined by a bridge, which is operated by a guy called Riverman. Riverman will not lower the bridge initially, but he chills out after you check in with his friend Bagu. That's about as complicated as plots get in Zelda 2, but I still appreciate it. Saria Town also marks the debut of an especially peculiar Zelda 2 game mechanic. Basically, Nintendo thought it might be cool if some townsfolk randomly turn into bats and attack you when you talk to them. Your mileage may vary on this idea, but, points for creativity. In any case, Saria Town is the access point for Death Mountain, so it's cool to pass through and unlock a new area. Number 64. Goron Mountain, Oracle of Seasons. You'd be forgiven if you completely forgot about this place, even if you've played Oracle of Seasons, as it's the only instance of a Goron settlement that doesn't factor into the main story. In fact, you don't have to visit Goron Mountain at all. That, along with the bare-bones architecture and meager population, accounts for Goron Mountain's place on this list. Nevertheless, it does a few things right. This is the first town on the list to have its own dedicated music, and it's a nice rendition of the Goron theme introduced in Ocarina of Time. I personally like when Zelda towns have a bit of a narrative to them, not only because it makes them more memorable and relatable, but because it tends to focus the dialogue around town in a less generic direction. The deal with Goron Mountain is that it's way up north in the lands of always winter, and this particular winter is abnormally chilly due to villainous shenanigans with the 4 seasons. This marks the second occasion that Gorons in the series have been afflicted by an unseasonal cold snap, but luckily these Gorons have the ability to retreat inside their lava-filled home and wait out the cold. The only exception is the aptly named Big Goron, whose size prevents him from enjoying the warmth and ambiance of a lava-lazy river, and who has subsequently caught cold. If you deliver a bowl of Sabrosian lava soup and clear his sinuses, you'll receive the next item in the trading sequence and be on your merry way. Number 63. New Kasuto Town, Zelda 2. This is a secret town you unlock by hitting grass with a hammer. You know, the thing hammers are used for. This is definitely under the heading of places Nintendo expects you to find by bombing, burning, and hammering every rock, tree, and blade of grass, but luckily Zelda fans are possessed with exactly that sort of mania. As you might have gleaned from the name, this is where the survivors of Old Kasuto fled when their town was destroyed. And given the state of Old Kasuto, they do seem quite justified in hiding their new civilization under a patch of grass. Incidentally, I like that the Kasuto survivors did not bring the local wizard with them to their new town. In my headcanon, they find him as irksome as I do, and were well pleased to be shot of him. There are quite a few secrets to discover here, like the final magic container, several hints to hidden locations, and a temple that rises from the earth when you cast the mysteriously named spell, which houses a magical key that renders all future dungeon design meaningless. Mostly, I like New Kasuto Town because it's the only town in the game with a narrative that seems to suggest a wider world. Number 62. Hidden Village, Twilight Princess. If I were ranking these towns purely from an enjoyment standpoint, the Hidden Village would be a lot higher, because it's super fun. The whole place has the look of a western ghost town, from empty saloons to wanted posters of a mustachioed outlaw who's worth a whopping 1 quadrillion rupees. In order to rescue the only resident, Link must fight his way through the dusty streets, slinging arrows and sniping Bulblins with the Hawkeye. I think it's also time for the first music award, because this track is fire. It's Koji Kondo meets Ennio Morricone, and I will happily bullseye bad guys all the livelong day to this western tune. Obviously though, it's not a very good town. It's really more of a level or a plot destination, especially given the absence of residents and amenities. Interestingly, you can tell from the sign at the entrance that the hidden village is in fact the original abandoned Kakariko village. And hey, is that a Zelda 2 reference? Old Kasuto, New Kasuto, Old Kakariko, New Kakariko? Both are ghost towns with a single resident, and this time that resident is Impaz, the game's version of Impa. In some iterations, Impa is a badass warrior, and in others a matronly advisor to Princess Zelda. Sometimes she's a combination of the two, but in this game she's the ultimate cat lady. The cats are the real residents of the hidden village, and later in the game Link can return for a quick game of feline hide-and-seek, which is the only reason to ever return. Number 61. Darunia Town, Zelda 2. This is the final town from Zelda 2, and therefore the best one, according to me, I guess. I know I've been beating a dead horse about how boilerplate these towns are, but this is easily the one with the most personality. It's a mountain town that you reach by climbing, and the sky is even a different color, perhaps representing the alpine atmosphere. It's also the only town that displays any synergy between its design and its namesake sage, because, Darunia is a Goron, and Gorons live in mountains. All the towns in Zelda 2 have a little puzzle you have to complete before gaining access to a new skill, but I especially like this one because Link gets to do his best Santa Claus impression and climb down a chimney. Darunia Town is also home to the second of only 2 sword skills, as well as the Reflect spell and more pseudo-citizens that morph into bats and dive bomb Link. This is about as high as towns from Zelda 2 can fly, and thus, with the exception of the townless first game in the series, Zelda 2 becomes the first entry to be completely checked off this list. Thanks for watching part 1. I'll be releasing the rest of this ranking in installments of 10, and when it's finished, I'll post the entire countdown as one giant video. I've already made my final picks, so leave your top 10 predictions below. Fingers crossed I'll put these out in a timely manner, but feel free to subscribe so you can check back in with the next segment. I hope you enjoy following along, and with that, I'll see you in the next one.